What's going on? My name is Jonah Crowder, and today we are going to learn some guitar chords. If you missed the last video where we learned how to play our G, C, D, and E minor chords, make sure to check that out so that you can get the most out of this video. There are a variety of chord classifications, but the two that we're going to discuss today are by far the most common. These are the major and minor chords. Chords are formed from specific arrangements of 3 or 4 notes. The foundation of chords, the predominant 3 notes, are known as the triad. These 3 notes are known by the root, the third, and the fifth. The distance between these notes determine the quality of the chord. The relationship between 2 notes is known as an interval. From the root of our chord to the third of our chord is an interval of a third. From the root of our chord to the fifth of the chord is an interval of a fifth. The basic triad is known as the major triad, and it makes up the foundation of the major chord. The minor triad, which is the foundation of the minor chord, is formed by taking the third of a major chord and lowering it by 1/2 step. I'll explain this in more detail in another video. Be sure to look out for that. We've already learned the D chord, otherwise known as the D major chord. Now we're going to learn how to play the D minor chord. Recall that chords are formed by a foundation of 3 notes: the root, the third, and the fifth. Once again, this is known as the triad. Also, remember a minor chord is formed by lowering the third of a major chord by 1/2 step. With this information, let's learn the D minor chord. The X's above the low E and the A string indicate that we are not going to be sounding those strings with our picking hand. The circle above the D string indicates that we are going to be playing that string open without any fingers fretting that string. For the D major chord that we learned in another video, we played the 2nd fret of the G string with our 1st finger. But since we are learning the D minor chord, we are actually going to be playing the same exact fret, but this time with our 2nd finger, the middle finger. On the B string, our 3rd fret is going to be played with our 3rd finger, the ring finger, just like we learned it when we learned our D major chord. Recall that an anchor finger is a finger that shares the same position from one chord to the next. The 3rd finger of our D minor chord would be an anchor finger to our G chord, our D major chord, our C add 9 chord, and many more. The 1st fret of the highest E string is played using our 1st finger. Remember, try not to sound the lowest 2 strings when we play our D minor chord. We've already learned our E minor chord in a former video. Now we're going to learn the E major chord. When referring to a major chord, such as the E major chord, it's not necessary to include the word major. We can just say the E chord, but keep in mind, if you're referring to a minor chord, you must indicate that it is minor. The circles above the low E string, the B string, and the highest E string indicate that we are to play all of these strings open. The 2nd fret of the A string is played using our 2nd finger, and the 2nd fret of the D string is fretted using our 3rd finger. The 1st finger is used to fret the 1st fret of the G string. All the other strings are played open without any fingers fretting those strings. As I've mentioned before, the fingerings on the chord diagrams are suggestions of the most common ways to play those chords. Sometimes different fingerings are necessary. This is normally determined by the flow of the music you are playing. For instance, if a chord progression requires the transition between an E major chord and an E minor chord, the best fingering would be the one that allows for the smoothest transition. In this situation, the 2nd and 3rd finger would be preferred when playing the E minor chord. instead of using our first and second finger to play the E minor chord. This way of fingering the E minor chord creates anchor fingers between the E minor and the E major chord, which ultimately allows for the smoothest transition. The A chord, or A major chord, is the next one we're going to work on. The X above the lowest E string indicates that we are going to try not to sound that string. The A string and the high E string are to be played open, as indicated by the circles above the strings. The second fret of the D string is to be played using the first finger. The second fret of the G string is to be played using the second finger. And the third finger frets the second fret of the B string. The A minor chord is the minor variant of the A major chord. There are many commonalities between these two chords. The lowest E string should not be sounded when playing the root position A minor chord. The A string and the high E string should be played open. The second fret of the D string should be fretted using our second finger. The second fret of the G string should be fretted using our third finger. And the last finger for our A minor chord is the first finger. It frets the first fret of the B string. As I have mentioned before, chord fingerings are situational, meaning the fingers you use to play those chords are determined by the chord that came before and the chord that comes after. When first learning a chord, a really good way of practicing it is to build the chord, pick through the chord, and then relax your hand. Repeat the process until you no longer need to refer to the diagram. When practicing transitioning between chords, you want to really focus on playing slowly and precisely. Really try to focus on limiting unnecessary movement in the fingers. Practice transitioning from each chord we've learned in this video, along with the chords that you already know. Some of these transitions might not sound too good, but this exercise will strengthen your memory and your finger dexterity. If you got value out of this video and you want to see more, make sure to like and subscribe so that you never miss a lesson. As always, keep playing and God bless.